you, all the fraternity in Hyderabad. It's the first time I'm actually interacting with the IIA chapter in Telangana. First of all, you know, it's been a great journey for us in architecture in the last 5 to 6 years. So I thought today I'll share with you the journey that we have taken as both architects and as developers, and try to give you a glimpse of the things that we're doing right now in Hyderabad itself. So the topic that I thought I would talk about today is an emerging typology that kind of merges urban and rural sensibilities. We call it Rurban. It's a common word that even the Indian government is promoting these days. So I'll kind of explain to you the projects that we have thought in this method of thinking and how we have executed some of them. I've been given a very short timeline of 15 minutes, so probably I'm going to be rushing through some of these. So towards the Q&A, maybe if you have anything specific that you want me to elaborate on, I can do that later. FHD stands for Fountainhead Design. We generally do projects that range from small, medium, large, and extra large, what you see there. We recently completed a Sheraton 5-star hotel in Chennai. We do projects abroad in Dubai, retail mall, a much bigger retail development in Iran, where we collaborate with our Dubai partners to do it. So these are our exciting projects, right, where we think we are creatively challenged to do something exciting. This is again the Iran mall which we executed. But that's not what we do most of the time. 95% of the time we don't do those exciting projects. We do run-of-the-mill developer residential projects, and that's our core business. So here you see a variety of things that we do, but that's where the catch is, right? It's this like this classic art where you don't know which hand is painting which hand. And these two hands, I mean the developers and the architects, right? The developers, typically when you think about the residential segment, ask us to do certain things. They're driven by density, market studies, costing, sales pitch. They come to us, how quickly can you give us drawings, when can you go into authorities? So we come up with standardized solutions, quick turnarounds. Mostly we think about the building and not much about the landscape, it comes later. So there is this catch-22 that we are trying to fight every day on a regular basis. And caught inside all of this is Mother Earth, right? And this is right, a GIF that I just downloaded a few hours ago about the Amazon fire. I mean, it's a serious hazard in which our built environment is trying to survive these days. So, and we are not really contributing to make any change in this regard majority of the time that we work. So what is the meaningful difference are we trying to bring in this residential segment? That's where we start with. And, you know, marketing and all this is pushing it in a certain direction, but the reality on ground is not really exciting. We really, our urban environment is deteriorating pretty fast and pretty significantly. So is there a counter-urban model that we can think about as architects? And is there a way that we can deliver it to as a new lifestyle to today's end users? And this model we are thinking should be something that is self-reliant, because energy is a key item today in any discourse. Can it be a prototype that merges urban and rural rather than just densifying the urbanity that we see around ourselves? Can we switch from consumption to production, right? So, because although we are saying dense urban is happening in one place, it's actually sucking resources from some other place. So we went through this whole idea of what if we do farmhouses? What if people just go outside and live on their own, produce their own food? But then it's high maintenance, high cost, extraordinary personal effort. These three things, pretty much after 2 years, you will see any farm is pretty much deserted. You know, you don't really, we used to have this farm with a lot of greenery and farm area behind, but eventually lost it. So then the realization struck us, to really create something sustainable, we cannot just behave like architects. We need to really expand our thinking, expand our role in the developer industry itself. And by that I mean that we cannot just go behind sustainable buildings. It should be an ecosystem. It cannot be just driven by one prototype. And it needs to be a collective responsibility where architects are involved, where end users are involved, where the development team is involved. So that's where we started our own development arm called Organo, which focused on creating Rurban collective farming communities. And this one is in Hyderabad. It's already completed. It's in Aziz Nagar on the way to Chilkur. That was the site that we got in 2013. So we picked a site that was pretty much barren, devoid of anything, and then over a period of time, developed it into a much more sustainable ecosystem. So the site was dead, but around it there was a lot of greenery. So we said, what if we bring that in and convert this into a community where 1/3 of it is owned by individuals and 2/3 of it is collectively farmed. So that's the site, and over 2 years, 3 years, we started to first bring the landscape and bring the farming into the development. And in 4 years, nature is extraordinary. It just made itself fully present, fully mature. And then today, after the community is complete, we all, I mean, I'm one of the residents in this community now. We all live with the farm as the heart of the community, and we produce our own food, and we produce our own energy. So to evaluate how this project behaves, we created a set of 7 principles that would drive this project and any such project that we'll do later on as developers. Food, water, energy, earth, shelter, air, and people. I'll take you through each one of them very briefly. First being the water crisis, and this is quite prevalent now. Because you're having a lot of farm, you really need to use a lot of water to sustain it. So we said we'll collect all the water that falls on the site through retention systems and put them into a pond, but the pond that is not just a water collection source, but actually an ecosystem by itself. It has fishes inside it, so when you put water into the pond and then send it for irrigation, it's already fertilized by the fish excreta and all these other things that works with it. Again, it becomes a leisure environment, so you could camp around it. So it's not really a dead water body or something that is set aside only as a utilitarian infrastructure. Eventually, birds, the biodiversity kind of takes on its own course. So we have now baya weavers nesting on them. We have a large biopool. It kind of finds its own place in nature. So we are fairly, I mean, these are our latest data of how much water we are consuming. We are fairly positive in amount of water usage. In terms of food security, almost 80% of the development has farm or some kind of food produce, and that forms the center of the whole community. There are no chemicals, no fertilizers, it's completely organic. The idea is to also create a social impact by bringing local farmers into it. We create a whole variety of vegetables, fruits, leafies. We have our own goshala with 70 cows, so each unit has pretty much a cow to give milk. Whatever produce that we generate more than that, actually start selling. So again, as architects, you need to now expand your businesses. You have to find other businesses to enter into. How do you actually deliver this, the logistics of it? So there are a bunch of things that we have to expand our thinking to actually make this successful. So the flip side of it is, the good side rather, is that as an end user, as an owner, your food cost comes down and any excess produce goes into maintenance and the maintenance costs come down. So our overall goal is that over a period of 10 years, you would pretty much become a zero maintenance community. And this is a place which attracts nearby farmers to come and learn organic farming. In terms of energy, we are 100% self-reliant. As of today, we've never used connected power. Although we are connected, we are on a net metered system. So we have solar photovoltaics, solar thermal and biogas generators. But as architects, here is the cool things that we can do, because solar power typically is meant as an infrastructure going on top of a roof. But architects can use it as a structure, as a pavilion, that you can use it for events and as a shading structure to the buildings itself. So the villas, which have around 8 kilowatts of power on each of the villas, actually shades the roof, so eventually bring the cooling load down. So in production versus consumption, we are always down. Even 1 or 2 months, we are almost equal, but otherwise our consumption is always lesser than what we produce. Earth, this is a key thing to not pollute the environment that we are living in. So there is no plastic, it's completely waste separated. And we are also trying to upcycle as much as possible by using crate wood that we would otherwise use for vegetable shipping, to use it on the facades and use it as a shading structure. We are also using pine wood, treated pines that are already upcycled, wood that are just lumber wood that we are cutting and putting them as shading structures. But eventually these will all weather out. So we have a plan that every 2 years we convert them into biochar and put them back into the farm so that it becomes fertilizers. So closing the loop of some of these things that we're using for building construction. And we're also involving local villages. These are some dustbins that we designed with a gunny bag that was left over. And the villagers actually put plastics into it and we can use it in our own waste management plants. Shelter, again, the houses, they're all fully open, very shallow homes that have plentiful lighting and cross ventilation. And all of them look directly into the farm in all the rooms. In terms of alternative construction technologies, we have used bamboo. This is one of the biggest structures we have built in India. And there's a whole bit of process that goes behind it. So you need to really understand how the bamboo is processed, how do you really bring it on site, how do you treat it. So that was also somehow part of this thinking of making a holistic living environment. So Indian bamboo industry is, to be honest, way behind where other Asian industries are in bamboo. So there is ways that if we can promote this, it could become an interesting building material and a structural system. We've tried with local bamboos, but this one is a much more engineered version of it. Probably a bit too close to steel than what we would like, but these are a part of our early experimentation. The later projects, we have sort of tried to innovate a bit more on it. That's the look and feel around the clubhouse, the central space where all the community kind of come and meet. We have a half Olympic bio pool next to it, which uses no chlorine. The walls are all mud plastered in this clubhouse, which was actually produced by the residents. So we actually made it into an event where everybody participated, created this mud and then used it as a mud plaster on the buildings. And this bamboo is now, we have figured out certain things that we are now trying to replicate and kind of go one step ahead. And this is a mandapam we are doing in Hulkoti in Karnataka. That's another pavilion that we have constructed in Nandi Hills in Bangalore, which is complete. So again, one system leads to another and you kind of expand on this idea of alternate architectural materials and projects. Air, we have created a system which takes air 4 meters underground, cools it geothermally and then brings it back into the unit. So it kind of goes down 8 to 10 degrees during the peak summer times. We have tested it. So it goes into the foundations through an air handling unit and then gets delivered into the house, into the living areas and bedrooms through dampers and openings. So that is something we have tested at a scale of a community which has not been done before. Of course, all of this is being done so that people can live exciting lives and do things that they have not otherwise been exposed to. So we have students coming over. We have close to 3,000 to 4,000 students who have visited Nandi so far. We have potters, so all the utensils we use in the kitchens are made on site. And the bamboo structure itself, the World Bamboo Conference happened on the day that we opened this structure there. So it is something that we have tried to create and close as many loops as possible. But what if this was just one-off, right? Can we actually try to replicate it? So this is why after this was done, we feel that people have actually positively reacted to it, and now we are doing a second project in Nizamabad where it's a completely private client, it's not our project. A bunch of doctors who really loved this and they said, we should be living like this as well. You know, it's quite a healthy environment to live in. So whatever we learned there, we are now trying to recreate it for a group of 22 doctors in Nizamabad. This is all completely privately funded, and it makes you feel good that, you know, people are ready to accept this and go beyond your regular solutions in residential typologies. So that's very close to what we have done in Nandi. I'll just run through it. The clubhouse, biopool, units, kind of open and well ventilated, similar in ideas. Now we have also moved one step ahead and said, we did a few things that were wrong in the first place. Not wrong, but probably our own ideas of community living was not as evolved. So when we finished the first project, we felt that the roads and the networks around it were not communal enough. So now we are developing another property around 50 acres further down the same road in Chevella, where we initially said, okay, let us do the same thing like what we did, like Central Garden with units all around it, but eventually, did not enjoy the experience of the street. So your typical village streets are much more vibrant, much more connected with people. What if we don't do this peripheral road, but in fact invert it and create a cluster typology and bring people into the cluster rather than making them circumambulate? So we took the idea of a street, kind of played around with it till it started creating central spaces and voids and kind of an urbanity inside it, while there is landscape around it. And then use that as our typology to create multiple clusters. And also remove the cars from the clusters, because that's the fundamental difference between living in a healthy environment versus everybody coming and parking their house and polluting the whole development. We also made sure that we are responding to water, air that's coming into the site. That's the final idea of the cluster. So here you could see how, compared to our first project, we are really trying to create a different type where you could, from every house, disperse into the central space and actually make that into a healthy, convivial environment. And this is set with the ideas of wind penetrating through it, so it's all very judiciously placed and patterned. Each of the cluster at different heights, how the wind goes through it, we studied. So technology does play a role. Some initial ideas of how the central space and the internal community neighborhood could behave. Of course, we are trying to remove the cars out of this. So wherever you walk, we have centrally parked the cars, and it becomes an infrastructure node which also has solar power. So the villas are not solar powered or don't have a solar power on the roof, but it's all centrally collated. The central area. So this cluster becomes a very different environment than what you would normally do in otherwise a regular residential community. So some of them could be very quiet and very peaceful and serene. Some of them could be very active. So we are trying to test different systems of construction as well, which we have not done in the others project. And also the central areas, the clubs, the common spaces, how do you create a different architectural form making and methodologies of materials. So again, we've learned certain things from bamboo there, so we are trying to, obviously it's a bit more developed and we are a bit more brave in the forms that we are doing right now. The spa area that's going to have a bit of a relaxing environment, an active sports area which has pools. So again, it feels like a large village hut, right, instead of a clubhouse building. Something very simple, very subtle,